It's 2 o'clock on a Tuesday. The regular crowd shuffles in. What? All right. So we might as well start with taking attendance. So I'll go around and ask if you're here. Dan, are you there?
I am.
How about you, Scott?
I'm here, thanks.
Aaron?
Here.
Linda?
Here.
And Peter is here as well. And I see Elizabeth and Shannon. All right, great. So the agenda. So we have just received, if you check your email, the draft minutes for September 17th. Thank you, Shannon. But I think the first order is we need to appoint a clerk to be responsible for the minutes for today. And Shannon has graciously agreed to share the recording and the template that she does the minutes with, and reminded us that subcommittee minutes can be very brief. So I'm looking for a volunteer, or we can sort of do what the full committee does, which is go around in alphabetical order, assigning the minutes. And again, you'll get a copy of the audio version of the minutes at the end. So do I have a volunteer, or shall we do it by name? See, Dan immediately turned off of his microphone because he knows that D is the beginning of the first name alphabet. So
I was thinking we were going to do last name, but
I got last name last time, so. Thanks.
All right, so we'll do Dan, because we're all here on a first name basis at this point. So Dan,
Okay.
would you be so
right,
kind as to review whatever recording Shannon sends to you, and use her template to give a very minute set of minutes as she suggests?
yes, I will do that.
All right, that's great. And Shannon, if you haven't already, could you just send that little template to Dan, and then we'll pass it around as we become alphabetically engaged over time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. All right, we have the minutes of September 17th. Have people had a chance to take a look at those? There were three sort of additions. One was to incorporate public comments similar to the Envision Concord public engagement process. And Dan, did you recall where?
Yeah, sorry, I just had to pick up a call. Yeah, no, it came. So after I got Shannon's draft minutes, I went back just because I usually take sort of high level notes. And the one thing that there were three things that caught my attention. One was the example we were talking about. Peter had asked about feedback from the subcommittee about the DCAMS hearing process. And then I think we went on to chat a little bit about sort of going forward, how we might do a good job of tracking the inquiries and the feedback we get. And an example that was given was how they handle the Envision 2030 planning process. I wasn't involved in that, so John I know was, and maybe there's somebody else that was on this call. But anyways, that's where that suggestion. Do you want me to keep on going, Peter?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So then there was a discussion about sort of some of the ideas that were discussed in the DCAM meeting, and a question was raised, how are we going to control the design process? Peter raised it. And are there things that can be done? And I think our conversations about that, our thinking about that has clearly evolved a little bit. We've talked about zoning and land use regulations and things like that, but this was sort of the first time, at least in the subcommittee setting, that issue, as far as I know, was discussed. And then the third point was, we talked about, my recollections, we talked about this idea that when does it make sense to bring a visioning person and or ULI people in? And I think the agreement was we need to answer some big programmatic or site assessment questions, things like existing utilities and access and school children and traffic and fire insurance rating and some sort of gross metrics. So this was another point at which that maybe it makes sense to incorporate into the minutes, maybe it doesn't. So I throw it out for everyone's consideration, but those are the things that caught my eye when I read through my notes.
All right, I would take that as a motion to add those 3 comments to the minutes.
So moved.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Linda. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor so signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Yeah,
All
you have to
right.
do a roll call. Aye.
Dan,
Aye.
Scott,
Aye.
Aaron,
Aye.
Linda,
Aye.
Peter, aye. Okay, that's great.
Great.
The ayes have it. All right, moving on to the subcommittee charter. In your packet, there are 2 versions, one dated October 15th, and then a second provided by Linda dated October 29th. I think Aaron did a lot of the work on the first one. So couple of things jump out there under key responsibilities. We know that we're not
Peter, are
doing
you able to excuse me, Peter, are
Can
you
I
able to share
share?
it on the screen so we can,
I
I don't know if that would be helpful or not. Would it be helpful?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm able to share because I'm using my phone and I'm looking at my computer, so I'm only connected once. So if someone has the 2, if someone can share their screen, that would be
I
great.
don't have the latest version. I have the one that Scott circulated. You had mentioned that Linda had shared some comments.
No, so
I don't know if
this is,
somebody's trying to track.
we're looking at the charter, land use charter before
sorry.
we look at the
Sorry.
RFQ. Okay.
I can pull it up. I think I have the right one.
That's great, thanks. So it's in the meeting packet. It's
one.
okay. I think the point I was trying to make was basically that we've learned since we started this that we are no longer using, thank you, that's great. So under 1 key responsibilities, it says in the 3rd line RFQ/RFP, we know we're doing an RFP and we aren't doing RFQs anymore. So that's one change to make. And in the 4th line, we're not really doing master planning. We're doing scenario planning or concept development planning. So I would suggest removing master planning and replace it with either scenario planning / concept development planning. People have any questions about that?
Peter,
Yes.
my only comment was trying not to use the word development. Just either you're doing
Concept. Okay.
you know, concept land use scenarios. Dan and I had this
Okay.
conversation previously. It's just my experience that whenever somebody actually does conceptual and uses the word development, it has a tendency to it can backfire.
In what way?
So,
In what way? I'm sorry, in what way does it backfire? I just
the
want to make
minute,
sure
yeah,
I'm-
the minute, so it's my experience, the minute you start using the word development, people already assume that some decision has been made.
Yeah.
And that is the use that's going to be there. And you're so far from that, even with your scenario, land use scenarios. That is not a development. For a lot of people in the community, the use of that word development means there is something has already been decided, and that is what's going to be built there. So,
Okay,
It's
I
just-
think
it's a-
from the audience that you're talking about expressing concern about, I understand it. I was thinking of it, further down, so that's fine. I think land use scenarios, conceptual land use scenarios make sense.
All right. Any other sort of comments on the conceptual, replacing master planning with conceptual land use scenario planning, zoning, and shaping the vision for the parcels? All right. That's great. Linda did a nice job. If you scroll down to the next page, did a nice job of really playing with the objective. It's a little fuller than the first scenario, the first version.
My only comment would be, since there's already a community outreach group, I think
Yep.
it would make more sense for our objective to start more with developing the scenarios than with the community vision, just so we're not overlapping what the subcommittees are doing.
So Aaron, to that point, would you feel better if it said something like incorporate
Yeah.
the information gathered?
Yeah, I mean, maybe just like
Or
the
whatever
first
the right
sentence is to
language
assist and
words there
support the
around it.
community
So in
visioning
other words, we're
process.
not,
Sorry.
Incorporating. That's the RFP, is incorporating. I mean, we're asking someone to incorporate the feedback and the input from the community.
Yeah, I guess I would think that our objective maybe would be, the first sentence would be what we're, our primary objective, and maybe we just start with the line that says develop land use scenarios, and the first line kind of comes out or comes into a second space, because it just seems like our primary objective isn't community visioning, it's developing the land use scenarios based on the community visioning. So that would be my comment.
Yeah, sounds good.
People comfortable with that?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. All right, why don't we take that and make the changes that we did in 1 and 2 up above.
Peter, who's making the changes? Just so we're clear.
I guess I'll make the changes on this one.
Okay.
All right, so we'll take one from key responsibilities above. Two. So what under 3, in Aaron's first one, develop site specifications for incorporation into the DCAM disposition and RFP process. I think develop vision and site specifications.
Yeah, and I think I wrote that before we knew that DCAM wasn't really doing the
Yeah, I think so
process,
too.
so that could probably be restructured.
Okay. All right, so we'll use Linda's subcommittee objective as we amended it. And maybe the key responsibilities from Aaron's bit with the changes we've agreed to.
Yeah, and on that second page, Peter, I noticed you have an RFQ that you probably want to eliminate
Yeah,
as well.
yeah, exactly. Yep. We're going to merge the two of them together to come up with one document, and I'll circulate it. All right, and that can get us to the draft RFP. So I want to start off by thanking Dan and Scott and Linda and Elizabeth for their input. Dan had also done a timeline that Elizabeth provided some input to, and I think the whole piece needs to be in the revised timeline with Elizabeth Hughes' comments needs to be put into the context of the RFP draft. So that's one thing. So we have a timeline that works, and Dan, can you make sure that that gets shared with everybody on the subcommittee? Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
think I circulated it earlier today.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Anyone that didn't get it, let me know.
All right. And then Scott, can you share your
Did you want comments on the timeline?
Yeah, please. Please, Linda.
Okay, thank you. I had a couple comments, and one was, and maybe I didn't read this accurately, but I wasn't sure. I realized that I'd heard that you were sort of checking in with the select board every other month or so. Is that correct? And I was just wondering if you might want to reflect where the select board fits in. I wasn't sure if these resource names included the select board at all. And whether sort of strategically you
There's a
want
couple
to.
of instances, Linda, where they do.
I see. I just saw select board secure approval at town meeting. Am I missing?
Nope, I thought there was one other place, but I think I may have altered, I may have blocked that off. But yes, I think that's wherever we think that we should be checking in with the select board as it relates to this process. I'm happy to add them as a responsible party. Resource name.
Because it just seems to me that if your meetings are scheduled sort of without looking at this, you might be showing up at the select board to say, well, we already finalized the RFP. sorry, guys. It's been sent out, you know what, like, where would you logically look to coordinate with the select board and, I don't know.
I think my response to that would be that Mark sits at the table with us at the AB, and the RFP is gonna come to the AB, full AB, before it's released. And so if Mark has concerns that that the whole select board needs to look at it, he can certainly raise that question. I did not get the impression that, but I didn't ask that question specifically, Linda, of the select board, that they expect to sign off on that. I would have thought that between Megan's involvement, Elizabeth's involvement, and Mark's involvement, that we have that covered. Otherwise, this thing is going to become very cumbersome and difficult to get work done if we have to check in at each incremental step of our process. We have a
Okay.
charge, and our charge our charge includes hiring this consultant. So I'm not, if I'm wrong, I'm hoping that Shannon or Mark or Elizabeth will tell me that no, that needs to be go a different way.
Okay,
Yeah, I just think perhaps with a nod to Linda, we should put in that the select board will have to approve the warrant for the zone change. That's certainly a point where we have to check in with them, because they need to take action on that. So that's a little further down the road.
well, I mean, they don't, I mean, they can, support or not support this all the way up to the town meeting. They can,
Yeah, yeah. So it pays for us to keep them informed.
right, well, you are keeping them informed. I just wasn't sure if that was something you wanted this timeline to reflect. That's all.
Other timeline questions?
Peter,
Yes, Scott.
I just had a question about the timing of the issuance of the RFP and the acceptance of the RFP. I'm assuming we're going out to prime consultants, and those consultants will have sub-consultants, and there'll be fee, and to allow only 2 weeks seems very short. By the time they get it on a Wednesday, they have basically 14 days to put it together.
So
And
Scott, what Dan and I had talked about was the RFP gets issued 2 weeks later, you have the tour and a meeting, whatever, informational meeting. And then after that, they would have another 2 weeks to pull together the proposal.
That's not what it says here. It says
Oh,
issue,
okay,
send out RFP on Tuesday, 12/3. By the time they get it, they'll get it Wednesday, because that's how it happens. I get an RFP, I don't work on it until the next day. It's due on Wednesday, 12/18. That's only about 2 weeks and a day or so of work. And I just don't know if that's enough time for them to do this work. After going through the tour in the middle of I don't know, Aaron or anybody else, speak up if you feel if that's enough time.
So
It's quick. You'll get
Just-
better responses.
wait a
if you
minute,
give
wait a
them
minute,
more
just
time.
to clarify, I'm looking at this. I understand the point. It looks to me like we're sending out the RFP on the 3rd of December,
Yeah,
unless I have the wrong group, and we are receiving them on the 14th of January.
no, that's the one I have is receive RFP on 12/18. It's line number 9. Why do I have that?
It's a 1-month activity, so the start date of that, Scott,
Oh,
is
I'm
on the
sorry.
18th.
Oh,
The
I'm
finish
sorry.
date is,
I'm sorry, I didn't read it correctly. So you're
It's okay.
sending out the,
So that's why we're looking at this.
so you're
So
sending out the,
it's maybe more than,
what's
sorry.
the 12-3 and what's the 12-18, I guess?
Site walk. In,
Well, you have a sent out RFP, which is 12-3 to 12-3, which is on line 6. And then you go to line 9, you have receive RFP 12-18. Oh, so you have 1 month to respond. But I don't understand, sending out RFP, who are you sending that RFP out to?
No, so we sent the RFP out on the 3rd of December. We
Yeah,
hold the information session, you hold the information session about 2 weeks later, 10 days later. And then we incorporate those responses, and then we're receiving the RFP on the 14th of January.
so what's 12-18?
That's the start date. That's the date in which they have received their, they have done the walk, the site tour, and they've received, incorporated the questions that came up. You know, we've issued those.
A little confusing for me because usually you receive the RFP and then you have a due date. And then you have stuff in between, but this is all
Well,
internal.
I can put it in as, I can certainly put it in as a milestone if that would be
Yeah,
less,
I
and
think
then it would just
milestone,
show up as,
I think a milestone's better because it's sort of a start and finish and you have stuff in between. Which is
okay. I'll do that. So what I could also do is add a preparation of the RFP, which might add more clarity too.
That's
So I'll
fine.
add a task that says prepare RFP.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, prepare response.
That makes sense.
Well, it also looks as if you're receiving the RFPs through the 14th, but the last interview is the 15th. Hold interviews.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think your
that needs
review
to-
RFP and select firms all that needs to shift out.
okay. Yep, I agree. That the predecessor should be 10, but it should be a finish to start relationship.
So my question is, you're sending out the RFP on 12-3, you're not getting it back now until the 14th. That's a lot of time.
It's also a lot of, there's 2 weeks of holidays in there.
Okay.
I mean, I'm happy to compress it, but I think your first point is valid, which is they're gonna be reaching out to sub-consultants. So that, to me, they're gonna need a month under normal circumstances. And
Okay,
then we've got 2 weeks of holidays.
2 weeks of holidays? I wish I had 2 weeks of holidays.
Well, we have a New Year's and a Christmas, and everything just kind of shuts down.
Okay, all right, I'll leave it as is.
But, you know, maybe I'll be proof.
People aren't usually this nice to Scott and I, so we
Yeah, they send the RFPs during the holidays to us.
No, that's when you catch up. I understand that.
all right,
I
well,
took hey, this, just for what it's worth, I probably should have chewed this up. This is a more conservative timeline, and it might have a couple of hiccups in it, but the idea was to not really compress it
No, I agree.
at the outset. It's
But-
always easier to go
you'll
I'd rather
get
have
the other
long-
direction.
you'll get better responses if there's an appropriate amount of time.
This is good. We'll leave it
I
as
agree
is.
with you, Aaron.
Yep,
all right, so Dan, you're
So-
gonna make those changes?
I'll make those changes, yep, and then we can circulate it. So I think, well, let me let you go on. I'll ask my other question later.
No, so.
It's related to the RFP.
All right, so any other changes regarding the timeline? Okay,
Linda, did you ask all your questions?
Well, I always ask a question and I don't really know that this is useful, but if you're going to test this for to see if it's robust, where would you think it's going to get delayed? Is there anything as you look at it that
I think that's a great question. I think that typically what I've seen, and I think a lot of us here on the call have been in the role of both sides of this process. Where I see it is in the preparation. You know, things happen. the the duration of responding. Usually the people try to hold tightly to their, when a client sets a date, you try to make it, but things can happen. And then I see it in the deliberation or the selection process, the interviewing, everything just takes a little longer to get everybody together and then sitting down after the interviews and figuring it out. And then the third place is when it turns over to the public process. That's a complete crapshoot from my perspective. How long is it going to take us to get? There are specific dates and hard dates like town meeting and in backing it up, the hearings and all that stuff. That's and planning board meetings, and we all know that. I mean but be that as it may, it's that's where things can get bogged down. So I guess that's how I respond.
Dan,
Just one question. Do we know what week school vacation is? Because the first community engagement is February 20th through 26th. And that may run afoul of school vacation. I don't
I think you're right.
know.
Yeah, the 20th is during the vacation week. I think you will also run into an issue during the interviews. I think there's a holiday in that week.
1, 2
I'm
through 115.
I think the town may be closed. Or
Martin Luther King.
yeah, I think it's the 20th. I'm assuming there'll be town staff that need to be a part of that meeting.
Peter, I have one more question.
Go ahead, Scott.
Dan, on the line 14 whole kickoff orientation meeting, is there a placeholder here for the chosen consultant to introduce themselves and kick it off with our advisory committee? To welcome themselves.
Well, I think the short answer is yes. I think that was so what?
Yeah, to come into a meeting and introduce themselves so we get to know them.
Yeah, I was thinking that's what was happening in that 14.
Okay, great. Okay. It says hold kickoff orientation session and has it's a 3-week duration. So you want to put plural, like whole kickoff orientation sessions? Like, so I'm assuming it's multiple meetings.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea.
You have
I'm gonna, and then I'll amend it to say AB subcommittees and the town staff. Sorry, what?
Go ahead, Linda.
you have a question mark on 11 hold interviews on DCAM. Do you want us to weigh in on that, or how
Yep.
are you thinking about that?
I I think DCAM is definitely going to want to participate. And so it's really I put the question mark there, Linda, for exactly what I was hoping you did. Is just, I just want to talk about it, give us a chance to think about it. I'm hoping that we're going to be, in my conversations with Megan and Shannon, my hope is that some representatives from the AB will be able to participate in those interviews, or if nothing else, in the preparation for those interviews and pulling together questions that we have. That has not, as far as I know, that decision has not been made. But I would argue that if DCAM's going to be at the table, then we certainly should be able to be at the table. Some cross section of us.
Oh,
But I'm not, that as far as I know, that still needs to be determined. Not that anyone's saying no, it's just a process question.
you're saying that the interviews, you're speculating that the town staff will be the only ones being part of that process? That doesn't, it seems to me right that you want town staff, certainly the chairs of the advisory board and certainly DCAM, if this is a
That's-
collaborative
that's-
process. I
Yes,
think you're right.
that's what I have relayed. That
Right,
is
so-
our hope and expectation.
So our recommendation is change the question mark to an exclamation point. So,
I can do that. I'll just take
Okay,
the
good.
question mark off
yep,
because I feel like we just discussed it. And so I'm glad that everyone is on the same, as best I can tell, is on the same page. So we will push hard for that.
great.
And as I said, I don't want to give anyone the wrong impression. No one that I spoke with said no. They just said they have to look into it.
All right, other timeline questions? Otherwise, I'd like to move on to the RFP. Now, does anybody have a draft they can share?
Yep,
Scott?
I do, I got one.
Okay, great. If you would be so kind.
It's the one with my comments on it. I don't know if there's anything reasonable.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
I kind of marked it. I went a little,
Comments.
I went a little crazy marking it up. Can you see it or no? Yeah.
Not yet, but I'm sure we
Let
will.
me share, let me, hold on. I gotta- Um, Where it
While
is.
you're getting this up, I want to thank you, Scott. I think it was a really, really valuable
Thank you,
addition to the draft.
thank you. I just have to find it. I mean, I have. um, um, I'm sorry, it's not. Shannon, if I send it to you, can you pull it up? I'm sorry.
Yep, that's fine.
So I had a conversation with a Concord resident who used some really interesting language that I really liked. And I would want to sort of fold into this. What we're trying to do is deploy an iterative and interactive process to create a conceptual framework or plan to inform the developer solicitation process. I sort of like that language a lot. So
All right, Shannon, I just sent it to you, Shannon. Sorry about that.
That's okay. I'll pull it up when I get it.
So just some background, I did my best with reconstructing the RFP, but a lot of the front context, I don't know who would help me write that in terms of the sort of the history of the prison, why we're in this situation, the transfer, all that sort of upfront information that's helpful for the developers to gain context to why we're putting out this RFP and what's our goals for the town of Concord and what our involvement with DCAM and all that stuff. So it's
So-
probably a page summary of, I don't know how we write that up.
Yeah, so Scott, a lot of times we don't reiterate a lot of that information into an RFP. If all that information has already been developed and is located someplace, you just put in a link for them to
Alright.
go there. So I think between, DCAM and the advisory board and, town information, the presentation, DCAM did, all of that's already been done. So you don't have to reiterate that in an RFP.
Okay, I've just seen other towns do that, just sort of helps people gain an understanding of what's the purpose of this RFP and the greater context, but if we don't want to do that, it's fine.
No, I'm not saying don't put, something in, you don't need to, you don't need to redo things that somebody has, already
that's what I'm
done.
saying.
So you can
There.
pull something and,
That's what I'm saying. I don't want to write it. If it's already there, we can just share where it is or attach it to this RFP. I don't care, whatever you guys decide to do. Not my, but, thanks Shannon for pulling it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Shannon.
The
Yep.
document also.
I just to finish on that, Scott, I think what you're suggesting is important. Adding the history and the rationale for the project, I think would be just a paragraph would be good.
Yeah, just a paragraph. And who does that? Is that something we as a committee would write, or is that the town of Concord, someone from town would help us write that? Or is there stuff we could just pull from existing documents somewhere?
So, as I understand it,
I don't have a definitive answer, but I'm wondering, I don't remember exactly how DCAM starts.
I was just gonna say, as I understand it, we're coming up with an initial draft, and that draft could say, provide historical context with link to the MCI advisory board page for paragraph 1. We would ask the town to draft that paragraph.
Okay,
And, we've done the initial draft. We're gonna bring it to the advisory board and town staff for their comment and input. We'll get that from town staff. We'll make the changes. And, it'll go to legal counsel for review and to be sent out. We'll have 2 cuts at the apple. This is the first bite that we're doing now.
I did my best sort of guesswork of what you were thinking, all you were thinking for this RFP based on taking samples from different places and sort of adding into it, but I broke it up into goals, and then you can see how I broke it up. Shannon, if you could scroll through, just a quick scroll, sort of the summary of the scope of work, and then it goes into the goals and try to summarize them by sort of subject words, that sort of jump off the page. And then you keep on going through the goals. Shannon, yeah, thank you. And then you go through the goals and what we're trying to accomplish. And then you get down to the tasks of the delivery for this right here, task 1. And I broke it up into really I think I had 5 phases, but it's and then I thought that they would, Elizabeth, tell me if I'm right or wrong, but can we ask for fees on each of the phases, or is it a fee proposal on the entire thing? And how does that work? So I'm basically, the task 1 was discovery phase. And then if you go to task 2.
No, you can ask for,
Yeah.
fee proposals for
I see.
each task.
Yeah, and then work with advisory, conduct public outreach. And then task 3 is the undertake visioning and concept planning process. And then task 4 is the draft zoning ordinance and maps amendments. And I think task 5, did I have a task 5 was final zoning ordinance and zoning map amendments. And then I got into, I saw some RFPs that shared what the budget was. And my feeling is, I go back and forth on this, and we only have a certain budget for this, and we can go get more money, but based on your schedule, Dan, it looks like you're weaving a lot of it into that July, timeframe for Simon's point of view with the 725 we have, which I'm assuming like $500,000 will be used for this maybe, but I don't know if we share the budget, because otherwise people probably get out of control with their proposals. I don't know. What do you thought?
So that's gonna be, Shannon can ask our procurement officer, but that will be a question for the procurement officer, because I'm not sure. So there's specific language that you have to include in an RFP. It's my understanding. If you, yeah, how this one gets procured, I'm not quite sure, because she's definitely going to have to help with that language.
Yeah, I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know.
Yeah, we can't go out for an RFP if we don't have the secured funds. And you can say, you can put something not to exceed. But yeah, I think that needs definitely
We'll
further
someone else deal with that.
conversation.
All right, Shannon, you can keep on scrolling. Glad someone else can take care of that. I just put it, like, I love RFPs that give the anticipated schedule. It's very clear for them to understand. These dates will change based on the time frame that Dan put out in his timeline, so we can change these. But I just plugged those numbers in, plug those dates in, and then the submission requirements. This is just a first pass at. The procurement person will probably want to take a look at this and make sure that we're covering everything on, what they typically do with the town of Concord. But one thing I said listed sub-consultants. I think we want to list the sub-consultants and some more detail about the sub-consultants too. So, but anyways, this is like a draft first pass of like the organization of the RFP. And then a price proposal. I don't have a total here. I meant to put a total price proposal for all 5 tasks. And then I thought it would be good to put hourly rates per staff, because I guarantee you this might go long, and you don't want to have someone that's charging $300 an hour versus one charges $100 an hour, and this thing goes 6 months late. So it's always good to get hourly rates from the consultants, just so we have that for change of time. And the other thing is, there's got to be a place here for attachments, amendments, like all the documentation that they can source or online, that maps, GIS, whatever you have available, Elizabeth and others, that we should be including in this RFP too. Is just a list of all the documentation.
Yeah, and links if we've got it.
Yeah. But I don't know. This is I might be missing something. This is just my first take at it over the weekend. So.
Can I, Scott?
Please,
this is,
Aaron.
yeah, Scott, this is great. The 2 comments I would make would be, I think we need to understand this community outreach component. Like, is this team, this consultant, bringing on someone who's also going to help with community outreach, or is that a separate consultant? I know the subcommittee is bringing on someone to sort of help it in an administrative perspective for a few months, but is there a more holistic kind of public outreach component to this proposal that we need to better outline? And maybe we need to discuss that with the other committees, but that would be one question. And then just a procedural question: should we have whatever task 2 maybe try to end in June, just so if we don't get more funds through the government process, that we can at least have a clean kind of completion of that task at least? You're on mute, Scott.
Are you reading mine, or is that June on Dan's or on mine?
Yours just says here January to July, so I didn't know
these dates are wrong. These are
okay.
dates.
Yeah, I think if we just wanted to have it kind of cleanly end when our funds run out, I think that would make sense. So we at least have a completed piece.
Maybe if we could finish the visioning and concept plan by June, that may be is that pushing it too much?
Well, I think that's what Dan had on your calendar, right? You're finishing the visioning. Was it July or June?
June, the end of June. And Peter and I both have some stuff to share about that, a metric or a comp that might be helpful. But Linda, I can wait until after Linda asks her question. She's been patient.
I have just a question that, that's a little bit of a detail. So I don't know how we're sort of doing the overview right now. So if you want to go ahead.
I just
Okay.
want to go back and answer Aaron's question about the role of vision of the public outreach and whether this consultant is needing to bring on someone board. If you could scroll to number 2, and that's a really good question, Aaron, because we're asking them to do something. We're asking them to do something, but what are we asking them to actually do? So, is that the public? Yeah.
Yeah.
If you read that task 1, task 2.1 and 2.2, I don't know if that gives the sense that we're asking them to bring someone on board. I think we're just asking them to work with them. But
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's collaboration is the first word, but is that someone has to remind me, I should know this, but is it community relations subcommittee or is it community outreach? I forget.
I think it's
Or
community
engagement.
outreach.
What outreach?
okay, sorry. Linda, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Sorry.
Sorry, Aaron, I think I interrupted you.
No worries.
So I guess the question I have has to do right at the beginning when you talk about what properties are going to be included, the prison, Junction Village, and Com Ave, Rotary, etc. And for me, I know we've all talked about including Junction Village, and there was a statement in the that I think got lost about the deed constraint on that. It seems to me that when we get to the question of economic feasibility, that Junction Village is a really important consideration because given that it's required to have 100% affordable housing in terms of what the deed restriction states, it seems to me that we want feasibility scenarios that would include that as understood by CP Concord Housing Corporation, or as stated in terms of what is in the deed in terms of what might traditionally be considered affordable housing, or what would the economic feasibility be if we didn't have that property included, rather than just sort of throwing it in the mix and not having the consultant have to consider what the options might be. I mean, it might be, and I don't really know what legal is doing, the subcommittee doing legal, and I don't know if one of their priorities is or is not to try and get Department of Corrections to allow a change in the deed, but it would seem to me that that might be something that we should be recommending to them if that's not one of their top priorities, because that would have a lot of bearing on land use strategy if we had that deed cleared up.
I think that's a really important point.
Yeah, I agree. I know that
So
the HDC is considering affordable as meaning workforce housing as well. But we need to
Yes,
clarify whether or
we need-
not town council, legal counsel construes that the same way.
Yeah, and I don't think we have to make sure that the consultant is aware of that, because certainly any potential developer is going to have a different view of the property if they are the ones who are responsible for then deciding what's affordable. They may not agree with our view of what affordable is as workforce housing.
No, thank you for sharing that. That's a very good point. Folks,
Peter, can I just wanted to,
Please.
because I didn't, so Peter and I had a brief meeting with the person that's done, planning effort, not dissimilar to what we're considering. And it was very enlightening. She shared a work product. It was a great piece of work. If we could produce something like that, I think we'd all be pretty happy. The thing that I wanna, and at some point, I think we might be able to take a look at it, but, what I wanted to say is that we asked her about, well, how long have you been working on this and how much have you spent so far? And this is a property, 10 to 12 acre, 6 block parcel in downtown San Diego. So it's not exactly the same, but it has a lot of similarities. And they've been working at it about 4 months to get to a point where I think we could be reasonably happy with, or consider that a success if we can get to the same spot by the time, from January to June. And so far they've spent in excess of $300,000 on it. And they're currently on a $35,000 a month retainer through the next phase of it. So I just wanted to share that with the group. Because I found it useful to understand that.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't see all the people. If anybody's got their hand raised, I apologize. Maybe we stop sharing, screen sharing for a moment. There we go. So I can see it now. So Elizabeth has her hand up. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
I just need to apologize. I have a meeting with at 3, so I have to jump off, and but we'll keep in touch, I'm sure.
We'll see you when we do, as we say.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Yep.
All right. Just another sort of takeaway from this is we need to find a spot to put in sort of a request for a sort of organizing vision. So what we really want to come out of this with, at least from my perspective, is big ideas for redeveloping the site. So, we're going to run scenario generation. Is one of those scenarios going to be around a big idea of a life science center? Is another one going to be around a clean energy center? Is another one going to be around a university research center? And all of these are going to be including a mixed use component because we're required by the Commonwealth to have housing, and the CHDC site is restricted to housing. So there's going to be a mixed use sort of live, work, play area because we want to have recreation. And, we've got some big ideas such as, making this a model of the town's, climate resilience and sustainability goals, whatever the development is. But I just ask that people think a little bit about how do we ask for these big ideas in the RFP. Dan,
When you were saying that, Peter, the word theme, when you said that, Peter, the word theme popped into my head, sort of what's the overarching theme of this place going to be, or could be? I don't know if that helps other people think about it, but that's
Peter, your question is, you're thinking we're asking in the RFP for them to respond with their initial high-level ideas?
No, I think that's one of the goals of the process, is to come up with these big ideas and maybe private sector partners to help implement.
But we're not asking for them to, not on the RFP response.
No, but as the end result of the RFP.
End result of them being engaged after we.
Exactly. Yeah. Linda?
So we're not coming up with we're not coming up with the big idea. We're just saying, come up with some big ideas. In,
Well, we could certainly ideate, we could certainly offer some suggestions. I don't know that it's our responsibility, but I think, I would hope that we would have, some ideas to throw into that consideration, but, I
Well,
think it's sort of almost a way for them to organize their response. And these ideas that they generate, maybe each one gets themed, or there's 3 or 5 different ideas that each one might have a different theme. I don't know.
but maybe none of those are the right theme, but we've already handed them 3 themes and that's what we're gonna get.
No.
I think it's, well, I would think that we would hope that, my hope would be that they're gonna come up with their own ideas, but I certainly would hope that either from listening to the community and or our participation with them, that these things could emerge collaboratively. I mean, it would be hard to imagine not having some, just like Peter shared a couple of minutes ago. I mean, those are all things that might warrant some consideration. So I don't want to, I'm not sure I'm understanding your concern, Linda, but I wouldn't want to be hamstrung. I wouldn't want to sit there and say, well, let's see what you come up with. I mean, I think it's going to be a discussion, a conversation, what kind of makes sense for the property, I would hope.
We've sort of
Well,
set some,
If
Go
we
ahead.
lead, if we lead in with, why don't you come up with some big ideas like, let's turn this into an AI center or a biotech center, or, then that's what they're gonna come back. They're gonna say, here are your opportunities in the AI field that, it's not my.
no, I don't think that.
We're not supposed to, the 6 of us come up with a
No.
bunch of ideas. That's supposed to be where we get from community input.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
and I said
I
that,
just-
Linda. I said that based on the input that we get from, I would think that we as Concord residents might also have thoughts about it. I guess that's what I'm saying. I don't see the land use taking the lead on it, but I do see us as a participant in that. And I think what Peter was talking about is the construct in which these development scenarios would be organized and presented. Sort of big themes. It may not make
Yeah, I
sense.
just wanna
We
make
may,
sure we ask
the
for
reality
big
is there's a lot of data gathering and input from people that may not be the right thing for this site. Or that may come afterwards. From that process. We may discover that, oh, look, this combination of things kind of looks like this. And therefore that's the theme.
Peter,
Yes, Scott.
I realize I'm missing, and I think task 3 is sort of, we're asking them to do sort of some economic analysis of the various options. Right? I need to think need to add a section in there about sort of economic market analysis research, and I can talk to you about that later on.
Yeah,
It's missing that in task 3. Sort of
okay.
market analysis. I don't know where this goes from here and how we take the RFP from here, but I just want to make sure I remind you to, I'm missing that in this.
Okay, so
I think that's a great question, Scott. I think because if we want to stay on track, we said that by the 4th, we're going to have a draft RFP.
Right.
So today's the 29th.
So I can,
So-
if you want me to make some final edits based on conversation today and then send it, I don't know where it goes from here, because I'm got as far as I can get, I think, with what I know.
So what we would do is we would input the dates from Dan's timeline into
Okay.
this. I would ask that people do comments on Scott's version. Okay, and send it back to Scott. So
Yeah.
let's try and shoot for Saturday to get something.
I'd like to, if you could do it sooner, if there's any way of getting it Friday. so
Okay,
For the weekend.
yeah. And we'll try and shoot to get comments to Scott by Friday. And then Scott, once you've got it dressed up, you get it to Shannon.
Can Shannon, in the meantime, since we are in such a hurry, there's some town language here. There's the context. There's also the discussion about the budget, whether we put that in or not, or is it not to exceed or whatever that is. How do we find those items out that are sort of out of our control?
Well, after we,
So-
I was just gonna say, after we review it, there's like a month before it gets issued. So is that when the town is doing all their
Yes.
kind of?
Okay.
Yeah. So
That's it.
we're, again, we started off, we're gonna get 2 bites at the apple. This is bite number 1, town staff, and it's gonna provide input, the select board, the full advisory committee. It'll come back to us and then it'll get finalized and sent out.
If anybody has a couple of bullets, they can email me what their thoughts are on the role of this consultant when it comes to market analysis or market feasibility. It can be scribble. I just want to know where people are coming from, what their thoughts are, and then I can incorporate it into a paragraph. That'd be great.
There's a community outreach meeting this Friday. I can't attend. It's ahead of the League of Women Voters meeting, but Dan, I don't know if you're planning to go to that, but maybe you could just check in with that subcommittee and see if what the feeling is on if this consultant is actually providing some community outreach services or if that's a separate.
Yeah, just to answer that a
I
little bit
can-
more
I can
from
do that.
the land use, from the full committee meeting, my understanding was that the communications is gonna hire someone, they're gonna work initially, and that whoever we hire as part of the visioning will need to collaborate with them. And the contract will be written so that either they get a handoff from the communications folks or they continue to work together.
Yeah, I think we should just make it more clear.
Just to collaborate and work together throughout the process.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I wonder if it may,
I was gonna say they may take over
Sorry.
community outreach at some point, or that sub-consultant, I think, is just a sort of short-term, or maybe more limited scope, communications person.
yeah, that's my understanding too. I wonder if it makes sense, Aaron, to your point, to share that paragraph, how it's currently written, and ask them to just sort of opine and react to it. And
that
if
would
it needs to
help,
be tweaked a little bit, we can do that.
Yeah, if you can do that.
I can do that,
Thank you.
yes.
Thanks, Dan.
Sorry, Scott.
That's perfect. I'm glad you're sharing that.
Okay.
Shannon has
Okay.
her hand up.
Yeah, I'm gonna be at that meeting on Friday too, and I'm putting together their meeting material, so I think that I can probably just copy and paste the community outreach part that's in this RFP draft from Scott and let them react.
That would be great, Shannon.
Thanks, Shannon.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
All right, so next Monday, day before the election, the land use, the full committee meets. And then a week and a day later, we'll be meeting again. So we have finalized the charter and I'll send that around with the language that we've agreed to. We have an initial draft that we're working on for the RFP. And I just want to thank everyone for your excellent input and collaboration in getting to this point. And we'll open it up to public comment if folks have any comments. Hearing none, I'll wish everyone a great weekend and wild and crazy